Hello and welcome to the Multiple Sclerosis Association of America's live webinar, Intimacy and Family Planning with MS. My name is Peter Demiri. I am the Vice President of Programs and Services for MSAA, and I'll be your host for tonight's program. Tonight's webinar is part of MSAA's 2019 MS Awareness Month campaign on MS and the family, spotlighting the topic of relationships and MS. I would like to begin by thanking Sanofi Genzyme for its support of our MS Awareness Month activities focused on relationships and MS, which include tonight's webinar, an upcoming Ask Me Anything online program, and an audio podcast. As you may know, MSAA is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to improving lives today for the MS community. Listed here are just a few of our many free programs and services provided across the country. I encourage you to visit our website or give us a call to learn more about our programs and ways we can help you better manage your MS. And lastly, tonight's webinar will be archived on our website within a week or so at mymsaa.org. As you're watching the program tonight, we encourage you to ask questions about the presentation by typing them in the chat box on your screen. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of the program and try to fit in as many questions as time will allow. Also, if you have any technical issues with the webinar, please type in your concerns in that chat box and a moderator will reply to you. At this time, I'm very honored to introduce our guest presenter, Kimberly Castelo. Kimberly is a marriage and family therapist, a certified emotionally focused couples therapist, and certified sex therapist. Her passion is to help couples and families live their best selves to find connection and pleasure. Kimberly, thank you so much for being here with us tonight, and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter, for having me, and thank you all for coming and spending the hour with us. We have a lot to discuss. We have about 3 topics that I was asked to talk about. One was communication with your partner, sex, and family planning. And quite frankly, we could talk about that for hours, days, months. So tonight is just going to be a quick overview of those topics. And hopefully by the end, you're going to see some patterns and some ways that you can get help when you feel stuck. So as we go through this program, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. If there's a situation where you're like, that's where we are, and I just don't know how to get out of it, I want you to know that we're going to walk you right through that and know what to do and how to handle situations that come up in your life with your partner, with yourself, with working with around having children and intimacy. Okay? So stick with me and we'll do this journey together. A little bit about me, which I think is different than most people, is that I myself have been living with MS for 12 years. So 6 months after my daughter was born, I had my first attack. It was pretty significant. I lost the whole left side of my body. I was unable to swallow, unable to hold a pen, and unable to walk. Now, as a new mother, I'm a wife, and all of a sudden I get this disease. It was scary. Very, very, very scary. So I really understand what it feels like to feel grief, to feel the sense of I'm stuck, I don't know what to do, and even feel helpless at these moments. And so what I have learned with living with MS and being a marriage and family therapist, being a wife, being a mother, is ways to kind of navigate this journey. Okay, sometimes it's not as pretty as I hoped, but I still keep pushing, right? And how to navigate it. So tonight, hopefully, you'll get some of those insights on how we can navigate life when it comes to our partner, intimacy, and family planning. And for MS, we're just going to jump right into it. And the fact that it impacts our life if we are in a couple relationship. It impacts our life if we are an individual. Okay? It affects our sex life. Living with the unknown, am I going to have an attack? Am I not? Is the heat going to bother me? Is it not? I'm going on a trip. Am I going to have problems with flexibility? There's also this feeling of when, for example, my husband, he's in a role of a caretaker of me and also in a lover role, and navigating those two roles of having someone kind of walk beside you during this disease and also be your partner and your lover can be very confusing, scary, hard to navigate. So tonight, we're going to kind of unpack these. And what I hope, at least, is that after this hour, you'll feel a lot more hopeful and you'll know a direction on where to go. All right? So we're just going to jump right in and we're going to talk about MS and sex. Okay? And I just want you to notice how you feel as I bring up that topic. Because when I talk about sex and I travel around and I'm talking about intimacy, I'm talking about MS, people get uncomfortable. People get very uncomfortable. And so I just want you to notice how you feel in your body and to give yourself permission to be not okay with it sometimes, that it's scary for you. Depending on how we talked about sex in our family of origin, how we've talked about sex in our culture, it will do two things. It will either hinder our experience around sex or it will help us. Okay? So either way, if my parents talked to me about sex and they were very open and wonderful about it, then I might not feel any shame around sex. I might think it's no big deal to talk to my doctor that I'm having sexual dysfunction. However, on the extreme, on the other side, if my parents didn't talk to me about it and it was shameful and it was just not something that you discussed, it might be difficult for me to talk about this topic. So either way you land, and maybe even in the middle, I just want you to give yourself permission that it's okay. All right? Exactly where we feel. So I want us to begin to kind of think about our family of origin a little bit. And think about where we learned about sex. I ask this a lot in my practice. And what I found is that most people say, I learned it from friends, I learned it at sex ed, but there's no way my parents talked to me about it. And so sex becomes dirty or not a lot of information. And it was through experience, positive experience, negative experience, or it was just, gym talk or talking with some girls, and they never got real answers. Okay, that's what my clients report. So when they first come to me as a sex therapist and they're asking for help, they become really nervous. It's like, is it even okay to talk about this? Is it okay to talk about that I'm having problems with my libido? My partner has a higher libido than mine. Or is it okay to say that I have pain during sex and I don't enjoy it? Is it okay to say that I'm having erectile difficulty? Is it okay to say that? And I want you to know that it's not only okay, it's extremely healthy. And depending on how you were raised will affect on how easy this is for you to talk about and how not. This wonderful picture is actually of my family. I'm right there in the middle, that little girl sitting there all by herself. And my family, this is about 3 generations worth, okay? So depending on the culture, our society, our faith, that all shaped me on how I viewed sex. And my comfortability about talking about it, not only with a healthcare provider, but also with my partner. Also, I just want to put out there that if you have experienced any kind of sexual trauma, that also can impact our sex lives. And this is an extremely important part because there is hope in healing if sexual trauma has affected negatively your sex life. It's a painful journey. As a survivor of sexual abuse, I know that. And yet there is healing available for those of us who have experienced sexual trauma, and it kind of bleeds into our sex life. The good news is, and this is excellent news, is that sex is a natural and important part of life. It is not dirty. It's good for us. Science, this is just pure science, that touch and closeness and intimacy and pleasure actually reduces pain in our body. So wanting sex, longing for it, is a natural part of being human. Okay? And if for some reason there's a block, for example, it's not uncommon for somebody to say, I'm tired. I just don't want to have sex, or my libido has changed, or it's just who has time for that anymore. There is help available, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that, to kind of work through those very, very, very common issues. Okay? So the good news here is no matter what your parents or your culture or your faith organization has said about sex, if it's hindering you, there's healing for it. Okay? If you've had sexual trauma in your past and it's bleeding into your sexual experience today, there's help with that. And if MS has kind of tweaked your sex life and you're thinking, I just don't see it getting any better, guess what? There's hope for that too. Okay? And I said this, but I want to say it again because it's so important, and it's pure science. Pure science. Did you know that loving touch reduces pain? So there was an experiment that was out, and I actually don't remember where I read it, but I know it's there. And it talked about that when people were experiencing pain, they would say from a scale from 1 to 10. And so the person would say, I'm experiencing a 10 I have so much pain. And then their partner would come and hold them. No drugs, no nothing, just hold them. The person would say, oh, my pain's reduced. It would go from a 10 much, much lower. So doing life with somebody, feeling safe with somebody, being touched by somebody who loves us, who cares for us, actually will reduce our pain symptoms that come with MS. It will increase our mood. We will feel more hopeful. We will feel more joyful. The weight of living with MS will decrease. So there's a lot of positive things about building a relationship with somebody else where loving touch and interaction can be fostered. So because a lot of people have learned about sex on the bus, on sex ed, or whatever else, there's a lot of myths and there's a lot of truths out there. So this is the section that I want to debunk some myths, okay, and give you the truth. One of them is that sexual issues are not common, and I think this is so important because 43% of women and 31% of men report some form of sexual dysfunction. This is outside of MS. Okay? So even people who are not diagnosed with MS experience some form of sexual dysfunction. This is true in my practice. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a job, right? People come to me all the time for sexual dysfunction, decrease in libido, pain, erectile dysfunction, miscommunication, and they do not have MS. Okay, so I don't want you to think that sexual issues are not an issue. For everybody in the universe, at least 43% of women that they report and 31% of men report that they experience that. I think that's really important to know. It's also important to know, so this is a truth, that even though we have those numbers, a lot of people don't talk about sex. They just don't. We just don't talk about that we struggle with intimacy and sexuality. So even though we have those numbers, it's not 100% sure. I think that they would probably be higher, just because it's a topic that, because of our family of origin, because of our faith community, because of our sexual trauma, because of fear of the unknown, we don't talk about it. Okay? Now, it is true that what we do know is that people with MS, like ourselves, have a higher rate of sexual dysfunction, probably even more so than what we are recording, because, again, we don't talk about it. But with MS or without MS, sexual dysfunction is super, super, super common. And I think this is another myth that I just want to debunk out there, is that if I have limited mobility, it means I'm not going to have a good sex life. And that's just not true, okay? If we have MS, it does not stop us from being sexual beings, allowing ourselves to experience pleasure. Now, it might look different than when we didn't have mobility issues, but it does not stop us from experiencing pleasure and connection. Okay? So this is the truth, and to me, this is great news. I mean, really phenomenal news. Healthy sexuality involves affection towards one another, touch, playfulness, love. It is not just intercourse or genital contact. Now, believe it or not, this is an extremely difficult concept. Why? Because all the way what we talked about at the beginning, okay? All the way from the beginning of how we talk about sex and how we've learned about it and how our culture, our faith community, our family has talked about sex, it shapes what we think sex is. So if we say sex is just intercourse, genital contact, then we're very limited, aren't we, on what erotic playfulness is. So a lot of my work is expanding the definition of sex, okay? And here we go. We're going to talk about this over here. So what do? How do we expand the definition of sex? Okay? This is simmering is one of my favorite exercises. Okay? So all of you, I hope you all know what a crock pot is. Now we have an Instant Pot, and that has ruined my analogy. So I'm kind of against the Instant Pot because it cooks quickly. But go back in time to when all of us had crock pots, okay? And so here I am, it's 7 in the morning, I'm about to go to work, and I throw all my my stew in the crock pot. What do I notice? About 10 o'clock, I'm like, that stew smells good. By noon, it's filling up my house a little bit more. My house smells good. By 5 o'clock, I'm like, when is my stew going to be ready? By 6 o'clock, I'm devouring my stew, not letting anybody bother me, and I'm just enjoying it. This is kind of an exercise that I give my couples a lot on how to erotically play throughout the day like a crock pot, right? The biggest way to do that is, I love little sticky notes, is you put it in the mirror and say, you're the most handsome man I've ever met. Or, man, your lips are gorgeous. But you don't act on it, right? Because why? We're simmering. And that erotic playfulness of just kind of dropping something that I wouldn't say to the barista at Starbucks, right? I wouldn't say, hey, you're looking handsome today. And if you do, that's fine, but I wouldn't. Okay? I save that for my husband, right? So those little drops that I give, or that he gives to me, starts to simmer, starts to help with my desire, right? It awakens another part of sexuality that is not just penis and genital contact, right? It opens up the door for us to expand the definition, to simmer, and to be playful erotically, okay? One of the things that's very difficult to do, again, because of our family of origin and just fear, is trying new things. Trying new things sexually. So what happened at the beginning of our disease sexually might not be the same way that we're experiencing MS today. So our sex life might have changed. So what does that mean? How do we try new things? How do we talk about it? And most importantly, and I'm biased, and so you're going to get my bias, is that it's okay to go to a sex therapist and ask. Because a lot of times we just don't know. So once we get the information, a whole new door begins to open to us about what sex is, and it relieves the pressure that it has to look a certain way. Okay? That's what I want you to get out of this section, is I don't want you to be discouraged that sex has to look a certain way. It can look like whatever you want, as long as you're both happy and there's connection and pleasure. It doesn't have to focus on orgasm and genital contact. Not that those aren't great and wonderful and awesome. And it can be a lot broader. So changing just a tad, and I love this picture. This is actually my kiddo when she was about 5 years ago. And so what do you do with MS, sex, and family planning? If you are, thinking about having children and you have MS, that's a scary place, because you begin to think, what is this going to do? Am I going to have enough energy? And I'm not a physician, okay, so I don't know about the medication in MS. So that is where I would want you to kind of refer to your doctor on the different options of managing your MS and trying, to get pregnant. That's not my specialty. What is my specialty, though, is learning how to deal with the thought of having a child. Whether you have MS or not, you and your partner are a system. So think about that. You and your partner are a system. Anything that comes in to your system is going to cause stress, whether you have MS or not. So a baby coming into the system, whether you have MS or not, is going to cause stress. Anything coming out of the system, a loss of job, a death, launching of your own children, that is going to disrupt the system and cause stress. Okay? So whether you have MS or not, having a child is a big deal. It's a big decision, life-altering. Okay? So what do? You have to expand your circle. You have to go out and you have to ask your family, your faith community, swap with friends on babysitting for free. You have to go out there and risk and ask for support. And I want you to know that that actually was very difficult for me. That was hard for me because I limited my circle to just a few people. And what happened was I got tired, and it was too much. So when I talk about expanding your circle, I'm talking about 10 people that you can call on, family members, friends, even paying a babysitter, so that you can get out and get support for you and your spouse. Because again, whether you have MS or not, something coming into your system is going to cause you stress. The biggest way to survive that, the biggest way, is to expand your circle of support. Okay? And the way to do that is we have to communicate. We have to communicate with our partner. We have to communicate with our family members. And communication will do two things. It will either bring us closer to one another, or it will bring us farther. I don't know if you've ever felt that, where you started a conversation with somebody and you thought, well, I was expecting that to go a whole different other way. I was thinking that we were going to, make up and be friends, and that didn't happen, okay? So the way that we communicate, it's actually extremely difficult to communicate. I tell my clients all the time, if you think that you're communicating well, you're probably not doing it right, only because it's so hard, okay, to really communicate in a way that brings connection. The good thing is that we have a roadmap, and here it is. So Sue Johnson, she's just wonderful. She's the author of the book, Hold Me Tight. If you haven't read that book, I would go out and get it. It's on Audible, Amazon. It is just so great. And I wish I was smart enough to come up with all these ideas and these patterns. I'm not. This is from Sue. But it's just so powerful, okay? And there's 3 ways that she has identified that we communicate. And this is, I want you to think about this as we talk about it, is not only as we communicate about family or about who takes out the garbage, but it's also how we talk about sex too. So as we go through this, I just want you to kind of think about who you are. There's one that she calls Find the Bad Guy. And that one, we're both accusing each other. We're both blaming each other. My husband and I, we're just pointing each other's fingers. I'm right, you're wrong, okay? The other one is the Protest Polka. One criticizes and complains, controls, and the other one avoids and defends and stonewalls. So there's another way to look at it. It's called the pursuer and the withdrawer. So for example, if I'm a poker, I'll poke my husband, and then he withdraws from me. And then what do I say? Well, he doesn't care, so I poke more, and he withdraws more. Okay? So that's what the Protest Polka looks like. And the third one is this freeze or flee. You both feel hopeless. You both don't know what to do. This is very common, by the way, in the sexual dance, where you've tried to kind of figure it out, and it just hasn't been working, and you just kind of withdraw and say, well, let's just deal with this and get sex off the table. Okay? That's where I see that a lot, especially when we're dealing with illness. So when you're in that find the bad guy talk, remember, my husband and I, if we're in this cycle, we're both pointing each other's fingers. We're angry. There's no winners here. We're not talking about how we feel. We're talking about what isn't done. So we stay in the content. You didn't take out the garbage. That's what I would be focusing on. I'm not focusing on that, you didn't take out the garbage, and what that did was it made me feel not loved or supported, right? In this cycle, I'm not doing that. I'm just pointing. I'm saying nevers. I'm saying always. So this is a beautiful picture of a storm, and I'm going to talk to you about it in a minute. But for this, find the bad guy. The more my husband attacks, the more dangerous he appears. So what do? I hit harder back. and I attack more. Okay? And the reason why I put the picture of the storm here, and I think it's important, is because the storm is the enemy, not each other, not you and your partner. It's the storm. Because let's say we're sitting here in our home and there's a storm coming and it's hitting some part of the United States and it's destroyed a town. What we will notice is when we watch the news, it doesn't matter the race, the age, the disability, the religion, the gender, the sexuality. Everybody's going to be working together to put together that town, to rebuild the town. What sometimes, unfortunately, separates us no longer matters because the enemy is the storm. So one of the ways to get out of this cycle, okay, is to not get into the place of blaming and criticizing, but saying, hey, honey, we're in that little storm thing where I want to blame you and you want to blame me. And how can we join together and find out what the real enemy is, which could be pain, which could be disappointment, which could be fear. Okay? So that second dialogue is the Protest Polka, okay? Or what I call also is like the pursuer withdrawer. I poke, my husband withdraws. So I poke again, he withdraws. Here, there's a lot of ambiguous messages. You don't really know what the person wants or what they don't want. And the withdrawer, the one that kind of moves back, is scared that they can't get it right. So let's look at the storm pattern, okay? The more disconnected and dismissed I feel him, the more I complain, I get critical, and I pursue my husband, right? And when I do that, he sees me as more dangerous, and so he moves away, he defends, he shuts me out, he shuts me down, okay? And so we don't ever get to meet each other, and then I might get more critical, and then he withdraws, and I get more critical, and then he withdraws. So the goal here, again, remember, the storm is the enemy, is to say, I'm feeling disconnected. And I want to get critical, but what I really need is you to get close. Okay? See how I just changed that a little bit to make the storm the enemy. I'm wanting sex tonight, and when I hear that you don't want to, I feel dismissed. I need to know that you still find me attractive, that you still want me. You see how I made that the enemy instead of just saying, oh, you never want sex. Okay? The next one is the freeze and flee. And again, I see this a lot with intimacy issues, is that both of you have just walked off the dance floor. There's no touch, there's no sex. And what am I going to say about this? Is that when we get to that point, our depression goes up, our hopelessness goes up, our pain is going to go up. So actually, even though we think that we're safe here, it actually causes us more harm to withdraw than to get closer. And let's look at the storm, okay? Because remember, it's the storm that is the enemy, okay? The storm here says, the more disconnected the more disconnected Kim feels, the more I withdraw. And the more disconnected Daniel feels, by the way, that's my husband. I don't think I've named him yet, but that's him. The more disconnected he feels, the more he withdraws. So both of us are off the dance floor, okay? And how we get off of that is say, I feel disconnected, and I want to withdraw from you. But I know that if I do that, none of us are going to get what we want. And I want to be close to you. Is it okay if you can move closer to me? Okay? Again, I'm making the storm the enemy. I'm not saying to my husband, or he's not saying to me, you're withdrawing from me, or you're poking me. Here you go. You're criticizing me. We're not doing that to each other. What are we doing? This is how you get out of the demon dialogue. And by the way, this is like a whole weekend that you can go to, and I'll give it to you at the end of the program on how to kind of change this dance. Okay? But one of the things is to notice it. Is to notice, oh my goodness, we're doing that freeze and flee, where we both don't talk about a topic. We're doing it. Here we are. We're in our storm. Okay? We say, we're doing that thing, that Protest Polka, where I poke and you withdraw. We're doing it. We're doing it. Okay? Because then I'm making it the storm. We're doing that thing. Remember that thing that we learned, that we both poke each other and we both criticize each other and we say always and nevers? We're doing that thing. That's where you start. You just notice it and you name it. And then you say, I need your help to get against it. I don't want to walk this storm by ourselves. I don't want to stay disconnected from you. I don't want to not feel you close to me. Okay? I need you close. Help me. Help us. Let's not withdraw this time. Okay? So I want to go back because I just think it's so important. So bear with me, okay, because I think this is important, these three. And again, I want you to think about what comes up when you think about sex around these, what comes up when you're not talking about sex, when you're just talking about anything, when you're talking about children, when you're talking about money, when you're talking about MS, when you're talking about the garbage. Where are you? Find the bad guy. In that cycle, in that storm, the enemy, you're pointing at the other person and you're saying, you are to blame here. It is your fault. Okay? And both are poking, both are angry, both are wanting something from somebody else, but not able to name it. So the storm there is to put down my defensiveness, to put down my criticism, and to really get into what my heart is saying. I need you close. I'm scared. I feel abandoned. I don't feel good enough. I don't feel sexy enough. I don't feel like I can do everything that I want to. And Miranda, I saw that you said, can we see the last slide again? So I'm wondering if that means your freeze or flee. So if you could type that in, and I will go back to it, okay? And then there's the Protest Polka. Now, again, I want you to think about it. Where are you in this? When you're talking about sex, thank you, Miranda, I'll get to that for you. When we talk about sex, when we talk about anything in life, that's where one person pokes, criticizes, says, why didn't you take out the garbage? And the other person goes, and watches the sports show or just walks away. Okay? And so what we're missing here and what the storm is that one person pokes, tries to get attention, and the other person says, I can't meet your need. I'm not good enough. That's usually what happens with the withdrawer. If you're withdrawing, you're feeling super, super helpless, and you're saying to yourself, I just can't do it. And if I try, I'm not going to get it right. And the pursuer, the one that pokes, is saying, I need to get louder because I want some attention. Okay? And so when you're exhausted, when you've done the Protest Polka some, this is where you go to the freeze or flee. And Miranda, I'm going to go to that slide for you, okay? Here. That freeze or flee is usually you're kind of you're burnt out of pursuing and withdrawing. You're tired of that dance. So what you'll see sexually and all of those other things, you'll see this mutual withdrawal. You've stopped touching each other. You're icy. You kind of just feel like blah, like it's not important. Okay? And so look at the storm here. The more disconnected I feel, the more I withdraw. I just feel helpless. And the more disconnected I feel as my partner, the more I withdraw. So the solving of that one is to say we're both withdrawing and this isn't where we want to be. Let's fight this together. Okay? Remember, how do we do that? We notice it. Remember that cycle we're in? Remember that storm? We're in it. We're doing that pokey thing. We're doing that withdrawal thing. Not you're doing that withdrawal. Do you see how I did that? I said we are, because I don't want to criticize or blame, right? And then say, hey, can you and I join into this together? All right. The biggest thing, and this is hard, you guys. I'm not going to lie to you. This is super, 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 super hard. What I do will shape my partner's feelings. Okay? And I have to own that. So if I poke my husband and he feels not good enough, I have some action in that, right? Instead of saying, I need you, I feel abandoned, I don't feel like I'm having enough attention, if I criticize, instead of saying that, I'm going to push him away. That's part of the part of me that I own in the storm. When I poke, I pull my husband, Daniel, into the cycle to withdraw. And it can be either or. Gender doesn't matter here, okay? So we have to slow down when we're fighting that cycle. And we have to be able to say, hey, I know that when I criticize, you turn away from me and you get scared. And I don't want that. I want us to be in this together. Okay? I don't want to be stuck anymore. Let's do this differently. And what are we doing? We're solidifying that team. Now, we went through, I told you at the beginning of this, didn't I? I said we were going to go through a lot of information. And there's going to be so much here. And you're probably like, well, I kind of get this, but I don't know what to do next. So I'm going to tell you. Number one, talk to your doctor, okay? No matter how awkward it is, you go in there and say, my libido is low and I don't want to be on a depression medication that affects it. Help me, okay? Talk to your doctor. The other thing is I want you to go see a sex therapist. The best place to look for it, and I have it on here, is AASECT. There's a lot of people out there that say that they're sex therapists and they just don't have the training. If you're ASEC certified, you have done hours and hours and hours and hours and more hours of training. Okay, so there's nothing that's going to shock you. And that's what you want in a sex therapist. You want to be able to go there and ask. So look on ASEC, and you can put in someone in your area. The books that I would love all of you to read that talks more about that demon dialogue, right, is the Hold Me Tight by Sue Johnson. And I do Hold Me Tight weekends all the time here in Seattle. That's where I live. And there are some in your area too. So if you're feeling like we're in that demon dialogue around sex, around life, get yourself to a Hold Me Tight weekend. It's 16 hours of the best medicine you'll ever do for your relationship. And there's a link to that too. The other book that I really love is Love Sense by Sue Johnson. And again, it talks about that cycle that we've talked about tonight, but in the lens of sexuality. So I want you to look at that. And sex toys are great, you guys. If we are struggling with pain, anorgasmia, all of those things, flexibility, sex toys are wonderful. Go look at Lovers or Lalo. They have some great toys out there. Do it with your partner. Look through them and go, what is that? As a part of just getting used to looking at things like that. And it's okay. It can be playful if you don't know what something is to say something like that. Or to say, ooh, that kind of looks fun. I'd like to try it. Okay? So talk to your doctor. Go see a sex therapist. Get those books. And don't be afraid to look at some sex toys. I know this has been a lot of information tonight. It's a really quick overview. Peter's going to come in here in a minute, but I want you to know that next week I'll be on. You can ask me anything about these topics. I'd love for you to join us. And I just want you to know that no matter where you are, there's hope. All right? Peter?
Yes, thank you, Kimberly. That was an excellent presentation. Tremendous amount of advice and suggestions and great examples as well. We did get a fair amount of questions through the program, so I'll start and ask you a few of these. One came in that said, is there pain associated with having sex if you have MS?
It depends. So there could be several things that are happening. Number one, if you're having vaginal intercourse and you're having pain in the pelvic floor region, it could have been without MS, right, which is called vaginismus or vulvodynia, and it's a tightening of the pelvic floor. Okay, so people with MS and people without MS have that. But anytime there's any nerve damage in your back and your leg, spasticity problems, you can have pain there. One of the things that I would definitely do is go talk to a gynecologist, urologist about that, because there are creams that can actually help numb that. And if it is a pelvic floor issue and not necessarily related to MS, there's physical therapy, internal physical therapy that can be done that is extremely helpful to help, because sex should not hurt. Okay, so if it's hurting, then there needs to be a second layer that we need to work on. So go talk to your doctor, urologist, gynecologist. If they have two of those specialties, that would be great. And really begin to talk about the pain in the pelvic floor.
Very good. Thank you. There's two questions about age and libido. One is from a man and one is from a female. The first is, I'm a 73-year-old male. Is my age or my MS causing my libido to be low?
Okay, probably both. Okay, so I don't think it's an either or. It's not uncommon as you age that your libido goes down. It's also not uncommon that when you have MS, just because you're tired and you're not feeling like yourself, that your libido will go down. The question is, how can we raise it up? So it doesn't matter if you're 73 or not. You might not want genital contact, but you can still erotically play. And so that is where touch and that simmering exercise that we talked about is super, super, super helpful. But it could be both. It could be just at age, your libido kind of declines, and also with MS, your libido tends to decline. And then you think about if you're on any kind of medication like antidepressants, tends to affect our libido. So I would talk to your doctor about that if you're on an SSRI and say, I don't want something that I'm taking lower my libido. And then I would talk to my partner about ways that you can play, flirt, and not focus on what it used to look like, but make a new narrative about it.
Excellent. Thank you. And this question, I think you addressed some of that with this follow-up question, but I think the specific symptom of MS fatigue comes into play here. I'm 31-year-old female and newlywed. I'm exhausted by the end of the day, and my libido has dramatically dropped over the past 2 years. Any advice on increasing your libido?
Absolutely. So simmering is a must. For me, that's a non-negotiable. So I would simmer. The other thing is I would switch it up. So if the end of the day is too tiring, then I would start the morning maybe with a shower together. And again, it might not end in genital contact and orgasm, because you're running off to work, right, and running off the day. But how do you start the day sexually and erotically? So if at night you're super tired, I would plan for afternoon, I'd plan for morning, and again, this is where expanding the definition of the sex really, really, really helps, okay? And it's also super common. Whether or not you have MS or not, most people say after a long day of everything, the last thing on my mind is having sex. So, and then you add MS on it. That's another whole level. So I would begin to play with the timing. I would simmer a lot and erotically play a lot and not focus on what it looks like, but ask yourself, is there connection? And is there pleasure that's happening here? And if there is, then you've won.
Okay, great advice. Another question, I feel like I know I am the one to withdraw, where my husband is always there and always patient with my isolation. Will this eventually drive him away from trying to understand my illness and side effects of MS?
Well, good question. I don't know. However, it sounds like he's, right now he's being super, super patient, right? So that's a plus. That's a benefit. What I would do is I would begin to own that I'm withdrawing. And I would begin to ask myself, why? Why am I withdrawing? It's not uncommon for the person for us that has MS to want to withhold things in order to protect our partner. It's also not uncommon for our caregivers to want to hold something from us to protect us, okay? Unfortunately, that actually doesn't get us what we want. It actually causes disconnection, raises our anxiety. It actually causes more distance. So we think it's going to help, but it actually doesn't. So saying, I'm withdrawing, I'm having difficulty sharing about my MS today because of, I don't want you to worry for me, I'm having trouble with it myself, is super important. And for the caregiver, it's super important for them to also say, I'm struggling here. I'm having difficulty. I need to turn into you now to talk about my day. So withdrawing from each other, even though it feels safe in the moment, it actually long-term causes more harm. So we want to pull in, right? We want to pull in and turn in.
Very good, right. And one last question, and it talks a little bit about some of the other symptoms with MS, and in this case, depression. I am so depressed I do not want to have intimacy anymore. What do I do?
Yeah, that is so true. So what I would do is I would do a couple of things. Number one, I would talk to your doctor and see, am I on a depression medication that's going to hinder me from having a libido? That's the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do is I would go on ASECT and I'd get myself a sex therapist to figure out, why have I shut this part down in me? And what does it look like to kind of revive it? And again, it doesn't really have to look like it's your own narrative, it's your own story, right? So it doesn't have to look like anybody else's. But what would it be like to just feel loved, held, touched? And why is that being pushed away? What is it about the depression, the disease, that keeps us at arm's length? Okay? And so that's where I would get help. But first, I would start with my doctor and say, is the medication that I'm on, if you are on antidepressant medication, is this the best one for me and my libido? That's where I would start. And then I would start that self-exploration of, when did this happen? And what am I feeling? And what's this depression meaning for me? And what would it look like if I reached out instead of stayed in, being isolated? You will notice that your depression will change. Because again, science, when you're touched and when you allow yourself to be touched, depression symptoms, pain symptoms go down. It's totally opposite of what we think is going to happen. But just research has said that it's true, that it does.
Right, excellent. And actually, another question came in while you were explaining that last one, so we have just a little bit more time. I want to get that in. I have MS, and I am a polka, and my wife is the withdrawer, but she doesn't talk about sex. How should I work with her?
Yeah, that's beautiful, right? So what I would do is I would own that you're going to poke, right? I am going to poke about sex. And why do you poke? I don't know, but I'm going to assume that you want to be close. You want to have connection. You want to feel loved. You want to feel pleasure. You want to feel desire. So I would start there. I would own what you need and say, I'm wanting to poke, but I know when I poke, you go away. And I don't want you to go away. I need you, and I want to feel close to you. Can we do this differently? And then get that book of Hold Me Tight in Love Sense, too, because it will really give you kind of like a diagram of like how you do this. But, of course, she's going to withdraw, and usually withdrawers are doing that because they say, I don't know what to do. They feel stuck. So you just want to be able to hold that. It's okay to feel stuck and not know. I'm here. I want to do this with you. Okay?
Excellent. Thank you. And I'll tell you that your examples have really connected with people. So just as a reminder to folks, we will have this archived soon on our website, and you can come back and watch it again and listen and take down the information that Kimberly had mentioned.
Peter, before we go, I just have one more question out here. Can I say it?
Oh, sure.
Somebody asked, what is Lovers or Lay-Low? And I just want you to know, they're just sex stores, and they're nationwide. Okay, so if you go to lovers.com or laylow.com, those are just sex toys that are national. And so that's a place where you can look at with your partner or yourself for any sex toys. So I just wanted you to know what that was.
Are they online stores or are they actual storefronts?
Both. Both. So you can go into a store. I believe Lay-Low, though, is all online. But Lovers are not. There are stores. But you can go online and you can, and what I'd like to do is have couples look at that in the privacy of their own home if they feel uncomfortable. And then that's the place that they can go, I have no idea what that is. Or, yay, that's super fun, and kind of just get comfortable with the idea of using a sex toy, because it can bring up a whole bunch of stuff. It doesn't have to, but sometimes it does for couples. So in the privacy of their own home, it just seems to be a little bit safer if they're nervous about it.
Okay, great. Actually, do you mind one more question? Another one came in while we were talking.
Yeah.
What if a family member has secondary progressive MS and their legs are contracted and unable to have sex?
Great. So this is where you want to expand the definition of sex. So if the legs are constricted, you can still give manual stimulation. You can still give oral stimulation. You can still touch throughout the body. Okay? So they might not be able to have somebody on top of them, right, like a missionary style kind of thing, and that's okay. So you might want to put them on their side, and then you can rub the penis or the vaginal area or the breast area, and that's where you're going to begin to explore the whole body of them, right, and not just focus on that area. The head on down, like the skin is the biggest sexual organ. We don't spend a lot of time on it, but it really, really is. So this is where you just get very, very creative. Okay, and you don't focus on, like, this is how it should be. It should be missionary style. I should be on top. He should be on top. It's more like, okay, lay on your side. I'm going to play with your penis. You're going to play with my vagina. We're going to touch each other in these areas. We're going to kiss each other. We're going to do oral sex. Those are the things that I would do.
Okay, great. Well, we have definitely gone up to our time limit, so I want to say thank you so much, Kim, for this excellent presentation on this very, very important topic, as well as I want to thank Sanofi Genzyme for its support of not only tonight's webinar, but as Kimberly mentioned, the upcoming Ask Me Anything program that she will be doing, and an audio podcast that we'll be having later on in this month as well. We are extremely pleased, as I mentioned, to mention that Kim will be joining us. That is going to be on Tuesday, March 12th from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be on MSAA's online peer community that's called My MSAA Community. And you can go to our website and register and be able to participate in the program. And we have a survey at the very end of this webinar to ask you for your thoughts and feedback and topic suggestions for additional webinars that we'll have upcoming. And we greatly appreciate your thoughts and your feedback. And again, thank you to Kimberly for such an excellent presentation tonight. A lot of good information, a lot of great resources, and I really thank everyone for joining us. Have a great night.
Thanks for having me.